Chinese spy ship got too close to a US carrier. Then this happened. What happens when a naval intelligence vessel slips into the shadow zone of a US aircraft carrier, pushing boundaries, probing defenses, and daring its opponent to respond? That scenario isn't the stuff of fiction. It recently played out in the Western Pacific, where a Chinese spy ship closed in on a US supercarrier conducting joint drills, forcing a tense chess match of diplomatic signaling, naval muscle, and rules of engagement. In this video, we'll walk through what happened step by step, from that moment of crossing the line to how the US responded, what risks were at stake, and why this incident matters far beyond that patch of ocean. The Shadow Lurks, spy ship in hot pursuit. The story begins when the USS John C. Stennis, a U.S. Navy supercarrier, was operating in the Western Pacific, participating in a naval exercise alongside India, Japan, and other regional partners. As it sailed, a Chinese intelligence research vessel maneuvered to a position about 7 to 10 miles astern of the carrier group. The Chinese ship trailed the formation, attempting to shadow the carrier's movements, scan radar signatures, monitor communications, and collect signals intelligence. The captain aboard the Stennis later confirmed that the vessel had followed them from the South China Sea, maintaining an uncomfortably close distance. That in itself isn't new. Naval contact and shadowing are common in contested waters. But this time, the situation escalated. The spy ship closed in further than typical shadowing distance, attempting to test reaction times, probe gaps, and possibly embarrass the US by showing that Beijing's surveillance reach is bold and capable. The tension rises. US Navy responds. Faced with a vessel creeping too close to a high-value asset, the US carrier group had several options: evasive maneuvering, electronic counter-surveillance, warnings over radio, or more forceful displays. The Stennis maintained course, but its crew took defensive and monitoring measures to ensure bonding or collision risk was mitigated. The presence of the spy ship forced the carrier's escort vessels to adjust posture, screening ahead, tightening radar and sonar perimeters, increasing electronic emissions control, and preparing response teams. The US side likely sent warnings. You are in restricted zone analogs. Back off or be considered a threatening contact. The Chinese ship, however, did not immediately withdraw. It lingered, edging closer, hovering near carrier escort lanes, hoping to glean data on the US carrier strike group's defensive envelope. But the US wasn't caught passively. The carriers and destroyers shifted sail patterns, conducted small course alterations, and increased speed when necessary. The tension peaked when one of the escorts closed the distance to interpose itself between the spy ship and the carrier, signaling that further approach would not be tolerated. Eventually, the spy ship, under diplomatic pressure and constant observation, pulled back. It might have stayed just outside a safe buffer zone before retreating to shadow at greater distance. Why this matters: technology, signals, and power projection. This encounter isn't just military posturing. It demonstrates a few key points: intelligence value. The Chinese ship was there to collect everything: radar emissions, carrier air operations, electronic signals, escort tactics, possibly even acoustic signatures. Every piece of data is ammunition in intelligence wars. Psychological warfare. Getting that close is a message. We can follow you. We can test your defenses. You may not be as untouchable as you think. It's a probe, a switchblade threat under the surface. Risk of escalation. Every close approach invites miscalculation. A mistimed turn, a propeller wash, a sudden course change, any small error can spark collision, damage, or worse. In contested maritime zones, rules of engagement matter, and every move is loaded with consequence. Rules of engagement and diplomacy. The US has to balance firmness with restraint. Responding aggressively risks broadening the incident, while letting it pass encourages more aggression. The spy ship pulled back before things crossed over into open confrontation, a sign that naval diplomacy worked, or that Beijing judged escalation too costly at this moment. Regional signaling. This show was watched in capitals across the Indo-Pacific. Allies, partners, and rivals all glean lessons: how far China's Navy is willing to push, how the US responds, and where boundaries still lie, risks, missteps, and what could have gone wrong. Collision danger. At close range, even slight course changes or currents can produce contact. Naval vessels don't maneuver as slickly as small ships. A collision could have damaged either ship, especially in unpredictable seas. Operational exposure. The U.S. carrier may have needed to modify or limit normal operational routines, air launches, maneuvers, to avoid revealing vulnerabilities or exposing its composition to enemy surveillance. Escalation spiral. What if the spy ship had grown more aggressive, crossing the bow, cutting in sharply, or refusing to back off? Such escalation could force a U.S. response, possibly involving warning shots, electronic jamming, or even disabling maneuvers. That opens political and military risk. Diplomatic blowback, if public opinion or media caught a misstep. If a U.S. ship accidentally struck a Chinese vessel or acted heavy-handedly, it would inflame tensions, complicate diplomacy, and possibly invite retaliation. Recognition of rules and norms. Each side is constantly redrawing acceptable behavior at sea. What's too close changes depending on technology, speed, sea state, and political posture. Incidents like this test the boundaries continually. Aftermath and implications. In the aftermath, the U.S. likely lodged a formal diplomatic protest, raising the issue with Beijing. Internally, in naval circles, they'll review the encounter, debrief tactics, and adjust future escort protocols. The Stennis crew will look at the spy ship's path, signature records, and data collected. From China's side, their naval intelligence network collected invaluable data and sent a message. They are comfortable operating near U.S. strike groups, but they likely recognized when the cost-benefit broke even and retreated before escalation. For regional states, this incident echoes lessons. Carriers are not invulnerable, but they aren't easy to shadow either. The balance of power in maritime zones is both in hardware and in discipline, rules, and confidence. The electronic war that you can't see. Beyond the visible maneuvers and vessel positions, a silent war was raging. One fought in electromagnetic waves. The U.S. carrier strike group wasn't just watching that Chinese spy ship with binoculars. It was likely engaging in electronic warfare, scrambling the signals the ship tried to capture, jamming its sensors, and feeding it false electronic signatures. And for the Chinese vessel, the risk is massive. If they collect corrupted or misleading data and feed it into their larger military analysis systems, they could be basing future tactics on false information. One wrong assumption, say about the range of U.S. carrier radar or drone launch protocols, could lead to devastating errors in the next confrontation. That encounter, where a Chinese spy ship pushed too close to a U.S. carrier, was more than naval theater. It was a test of wills, of tactics, and of maritime confidence. In that narrow ribbon of sea, lessons were exchanged, boundaries probed, and signals sent. If this story caught your attention, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, and share this video so more people see what's happening on those contested seas. In the comments, tell me, do you think the U.S. should have pushed that spy ship harder, forced it off, or was restraint the smarter move? I'll be watching the seas with you, so stay alert and see you next time. Stay alert and see